Hello and welcome to Retech, and you might be wondering why this one's got association with NASA and Babylon 5. Well, you may or may not know that the Amiga was one of the first generation of graphics machines that was used to produce all of the graphics and science fiction space stations and battle scenes and starships, etc. in a serial called Babylon 5. Now, Babylon 5, if you don't know about it, was set in space, and it was also the first major production to not use models and to use computer generated graphics. So if you look at them with today's eyes, you probably think they're a little bit different. They're not as realistic as the graphics you have today or later on, even in the Star Trek series or the Star Trek movies. But it was the first major television series to use computer generated graphics rather than expensive models, and that's how they were able to take the production costs down. But you're also probably wondering where NASA comes into this. Well, NASA really didn't have anything to do with Babylon 5. You see, back in the late 1980s and early 1990s, NASA was looking around for a machine to be able to record vast amounts of data from their launches, whether it was dedicated rocket launches or the space shuttle launches. They wanted a machine not just to handle the raw data, they wanted a machine that was able to produce graphs and graphics associated with. Now, they initially looked at the Apple Macintosh, but Apple were very unwilling to give NASA the detailed specifications and schematics of the machine that NASA really needed to develop the hardware to go along with their platform, which again was the Mac, which is what they wanted to use at the time. And they kind of shot themselves in the foot because Apple refused to divulge anything just in case it breached their trade secrets, which is a bit odd. I mean, you're not as if NASA was going to go around producing Apple type clones to sell on the free market. That was never going to happen. So their thinking was a little bit skewed. But NASA also looked at the PCs of the time. But at the time, the PCs were deemed unsuitable because of the way they were built. They were literally still a hodgepodge of separate parts. Nothing was integrated, and it's not what they were looking for. They were looking for a platform, a single make reliable platform that could do what they wanted. Now, Gary Jones was the lead in all of this. He was the chief systems engineer for NASA at the time, and they basically settled on the Amiga 1000 because, in his words, it was fully capable of doing what they wanted it to do. And also, when they approached Commodore was more than willing to give them any information that they wanted about the machine. And it went so far as Commodore supplying over 1.5 meters of documents for the Amiga systems. So NASA had a very good knowledge of what the Amiga could and couldn't do, and also had a great understanding how to integrate their bespoke hardware into the Amiga platform. Now, that's where Commodore was much better than Apple, because Commodore weren't frightened of giving people everything they could ever want to make the Amiga work for them, which was a fantastic way of doing things, which is why the Amiga was used in NASA all the way through to 2006. And that was quite a long stretch, but it wasn't all plain sailing at the time, because, as Gary said, NASA weren't particularly keen on using the Amigas because they saw them as cheap, too cheap, not high enough cost, which is a bit odd when you think about cost being the basis for what something can do, or the value of something. And I think Gary kind of saw that and he ignored them, and that's how the Amiga really ended up as the backbone for a lot of the system management for the space program within NASA. So I'll just list the amount of launches the Amigas were eventually used for. And they were the Atlas, the Delta II, Delta III. There were also the Athena and Titan rockets, as well as being used on the space shuttle. And they weren't mission critical in the way that they were for the Atlas, Delta, Delta III and Titan, etc., but they were used especially in the docking situations that the shuttle used to do with the space stations, and a lot of data was required to have been sent back whenever the shuttle did these kind of maneuvers. Now, what made the Amiga so good? Well, the Amigas was a dedicated platform. It wasn't a mix and match platform like the PC was. It wasn't a closed platform like the Apple was, and it also wasn't a platform that was vastly expensive like the DEC Alpha system, which was another system that they actually thought about using. But again, Gary Jones settled on the Amiga partly in terms of cost, because it was a very low cost and very reliable way of doing what he needed a computer to do. Now, in his words, that if a computer was capable of playing games with graphics, and very good graphics for the time, then it was more than capable of doing what he wanted a computer to do within NASA. And this was because the Amiga was very good at processing numbers and also very good at displaying graphs and graphics, which was something that he wanted the machines to be able to do. So what about Babylon 5? Well, Babylon 5 was very different. The producers of Babylon 5 and the production company used the Amiga to render the graphics, and there was a total of 24, all linked to video toasters. They all had 32 megs on board, which was a lot of memory for the time, and they were all networked together. They also used a 486 PC, as far as I can recall, as a file server to share the data, or to share the actual files between the machines. Now, 32 megs doesn't seem an awful lot when you compare it to today's machines, but at the time it was a big chunk of memory, and the video toaster was already used in production companies anyway. Lightwave was a fantastic way of producing 3D models, 3D rendered models. Although when I used Lightwave on my lowly Amiga 500 with expanded memory and a hard drive, it would take a day or more to render a single frame, because it was that intensive on the power and the processing power for the Amiga itself. So, you know, it wasn't a fast way of doing things, but because of the way these machines were networked, and because of the way that all these machines had extra memory, a little bit faster processors, and they were all file shared, they could actually render an image within about 45 minutes, which was a vast improvement on, you know, a lowly Amiga 500 using the same software. Now, it was groundbreaking. The graphics and the way the graphics were presented were groundbreaking. Now, that's something that really today we kind of forget. And it kept the costs down of each episode to around about $650,000 per episode, which was relatively cheap back in those days. Now, if you have an Amiga and you want to try it out for yourself, you know, go and get a copy of Lightwave 3D and put it on your machine and have a play, because it still produces some fantastic graphics and some fantastic renderings. That's if you have a beefy enough machine so you don't have to wait 24 or 48 hours for the actual thing to render. So give it a try. You find out that the Amiga can still hold its own. It's got a very different kind of look and feel to modern machines, and it's something that we kind of might be missing out a little bit. And all you need to do is look at some of the demos of the time that are still available if you look around and download them, and you'll see some of the 3D rendered demos and images that were used in Lightwave and Lightwave 3D. Now, this is how the Amiga was linked to space back in the late 1980s and early 1990s. And don't forget that there wasn't really anything else out there at the time that could really compete with the Amiga for what it was doing for graphics, or what it was needed to be done within NASA. So that's why they were used, pure and simple. If there was something better at the time, it would have been used. So the Amiga wasn't just a games machine, and it definitely wasn't just a toy. So I hope you like this quick kind of foray into what the Amiga could and couldn't do back in the day, and I hope it's give you a little bit of inspiration on what you can and can't do with the Amiga, and what you might be able to want to try on the Amiga to kind of give it a little bit of a different light. Okay, so thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you soon. Thank you. Please subscribe, and I'll see you soon.